Hello and welcome to Chillin' with Dylan. I'm your host Dylan, and I'm so excited to introduce the next most exciting topic that we have been lining up for a long, long time now. Today, we're talking about the battle between two great cities in a great country of Australia. These cities have been talked about a lot amongst people for centuries even, and we are talking about Sydney and Melbourne. So you'll hear it first, which city is the best to live in and do everything else in. And our guests today are the classic trio. I'm pleased to introduce, we got Adam and we got Irene.
Woo!
Hello. Hi.
That
Hey,
sounded,
good.
you sounded so unenthused, Irene.
Me, really? Oh,
Yeah.
I really am enthused, I promise.
Yeah,
Woo!
no,
Woo!
you must be getting really excited to talk about your home city, Irene.
Sure am, I'm ready. I'm ready for this
Yeah,
debate.
Oh, she's gonna about to like smash Sydney.
No.
yeah.
We'll keep it nice.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it would be quite entertaining for the guests. So if it does come out, I probably won't cut it. So uh, be honest. That's all I think we need to do, eh? So I guess you guys have been traveling a bit recently. I know, Adam, you visited Melbourne and Owen, you visited Sydney, but um, yeah, how's your trips been recently?
Well, I can go first. So yeah, I went to Sydney, I believe at the end of March, and also at the end of December or the start of December last year, both for work trips. So a bit of a fun fact, I've actually never been to Sydney like just out of pure like leisure or for fun. It's always been for it's always been for work or for like a conference. So I feel like I've seen sort of the main touristy bits of Sydney sort of in sort of the short periods of time that I've been able to visit, but I haven't actually been on a trip where the purpose was just to, you know, go visit as a tourist. But yeah, both trips were really fun. Managed to see some sort of local spots. Didn't really go back to sort of the main attractions, which was kind of nice. Um, and yeah, managed to catch up with some people there as well. So yeah, it was good.
Surely the number one attraction was Adam,
Yeah,
right? Seeing Adam.
exactly.
Yeah, we made it happen.
Visiting Adam was the main attraction.
I've heard tourists all around the world come.
Yeah.
Specifically, mostly from New Zealand, but
Number one on TripAdvisor.
Top friend,
Uh,
top attraction.
Exactly.
love it. Yeah. And I've been over in Melbourne quite a lot recently as well. So I think there was a month where I was over in Melbourne 3 times for work. Oh, partially work, partially leisure as well. So as as some of you guys might know, my work is in Melbourne, so I fly down a few times a year just for big team events or any sort of like family events or stuff like that. So it's always nice to go down and see my coworkers. So I got to be a bit careful not to bash Melbourne too hard, but I gotta, gotta represent both sides fairly and equally in this chat. But yeah, Melbourne's always been a great place, and I go down a lot for like sometimes sporting events or just for a holiday, and it's always a great time. So yeah, no complaints. Love it.
What sort of sporting events do you go for? And I've heard there's some good stuff in Melbourne, isn't there?
Well, Melbourne is kind of like the sporting capital of Australia, right? Irene?
Oh,
Or is
one
it
point
of
to
the
Melbourne.
world?
Of the
Of the
world.
world. That's very optimistic.
Is that like a hands down Melbourne is number one, or is that like a
Oh, I feel
someone
I
for
feel
second?
hands down. Oh, depends on what sport you're talking about, but as a whole, I reckon Melbourne definitely has sports over Sydney. Uh,
Yeah, it's surprising actually, because I feel like when you think about it, I would have thought like, oh yeah, Sydney probably has a bunch of sports there, but we have a lot of like the main ones, like obviously like the Oz Open, the Grand Prix.
Yeah,
You have Melbourne
yeah.
Cup, even though I don't support horse racing. Like I think we host a lot of cricket events, obviously like AFL. So yeah, I feel like it is safe to say sporting capital, but again, maybe it depends on the sport that you follow. I'm
Yeah,
not sure if there's some like niche sports that happen in like WA or something, and we're just discounting them.
yeah. I personally I'm really into tennis, so that's partly why I would say I would pick Melbourne for sport. Um, Not so much like Aussie rules or AFL. I know that's massive. Is it a Melbourne or Victoria thing? Like, and was it just yeah? It's that part of Australia, right?
I feel it's
It,
like in almost like every part of Australia, but
yeah,
it's
yeah,
definitely a big thing in Melbourne for sure.
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. Like
I
the majority of
yeah,
the teams are based in Victoria, which is interesting. Like I think there are teams for most of the other states, not all, but I think a lot of them. But for some reason, like the vast majority are from Victoria. So yeah,
okay.
it's
Go
interesting.
there. Go to Melbourne if you want to watch AFL.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
It's a home, and
home of the AFL. The
yeah,
only other exception is, or like the main exception that I can think of is probably rugby.
Mm,
So the
yeah.
NRL, which
yeah.
is much bigger in Sydney. So it's probably Sydney's got more NRL, and Melbourne's probably got more AFL. I did a quick
Yeah.
fact check. Out of the 16 current NRL teams, 9 of them are based in Sydney.
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm
okay, that makes sense.
I'm not a NRL fan, but like clearly I can give my facts.
The stats don't lie.
The stats don't lie.
Yeah, no, I find it interesting how, yeah, like, each city or area, state is just a bit more into one of the main football codes. They all, to some people, like, honestly, if I talk to my family or like, anyone who doesn't really know much, to some, it's like probably the same sport, right? They all have an oval ball where there's 15 people, 13 people, whether they wear singlets or not singlets. I think they wear singlets. That's the one thing uh, AFL Aussie rules. They have to wear that, but like, yeah, maybe to others outside of Australia or like places where oval ball rugby sports and whatever isn't common. It's just like doesn't even matter. It's just like oh, um,
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think there's like, if for someone who maybe doesn't follow either sport, there are enough similarities that they might think they're the same thing.
Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, but
Fair enough.
Well, I guess that's one aspect of things to do, but like for those that aren't aren't very athletic or into watching grown men chase balls around, then what else is there to do? What do you guys like doing in your?
oh my
Are
god.
we talking about living, or are we talking about like just travel and visiting?
Yeah, like things to do or like like I think this is just in general, whether you're tourist or living. Yeah. I mean, I would say, well, like I've been to City of Melbourne both and done all the main touristy things like Opera House in Sydney and I don't know what else is there. Go across the Harbour Bridge, um, visit Adam. That's about it. That's honestly three things you should do. But um, like, there's obviously a whole bunch of other activities and things going on, like festivals, culture, arts. Is there much I think you'd suggest people checking out?
I feel like for Sydney, they're like outside this typical touristy stuff. I think Sydney is more of a marketable city
Yeah,
to international tourists, just because there's like iconic sites and things to do. But in terms of like actual enjoyable things, or like more of a chill weekend, I think Melbourne has more things going on. It's got a lot of art, culture. Like Melbourne had the Melbourne Comedy Festival recently, so I feel there's always something to do in Melbourne. Sydney's pretty good as well. For I feel like there's enough things to do, but Melbourne just really takes that up to the next level.
Mm. Yeah, I think it depends on sort of what kind of person you are and like how you like to spend your time. Like I think Melbourne's pretty good when it comes to like cafe and food culture and like arts, like what Adam mentioned. We have quite a few festivals that happen throughout the year and those types of events, which are always really good fun.
Mm.
But I think Sydney definitely have better like beaches typically better weather. Like I know that you guys have gone through a bit of
Not
a
recently.
rough patch. You poor things. But
You're like, this is what Melbourne goes through every other year.
yeah, but yeah, I think I hear a lot of great things about Sydney in terms of like, oh, you can just like walk to the beach, like go down to the beach on the weekend, have a like nicer walk, have a swim. So I feel like they're two sort of different vibes, but I think they're both good vibes overall, to
Yeah.
be quite frank. But yeah, like the main things I do like on the weekend, I just honestly like to just eat out. If there's something happening in the city, like the comedy festival or like some exhibit at NGV, like that's always fun to go out to as well. But yeah, I feel like both cities have a lot of hustle and bustle. So there's like a lot to do, but just depends on what vibe you're going for is what I'd say.
Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely would say Sydney's beaches are amazing, hands down. Probably one of the best places in the world for beaches. Yeah, like
It's also
if,
very busy. It's packed some days.
yeah,
If you go to a
Bondi
tourist one.
and those ones, eh? Yeah.
Yeah.
Northern beaches, I've been to some of them. They're pretty awesome. Like
Yeah.
I'd say,
They're pretty good.
yeah, they're quite nice. Reminds me of the North Shore of Auckland. Pretty much the
Yeah.
same.
Yeah. Geographically, there's a lot of similarities between Auckland and Sydney, I would say.
Yeah. So for Aucklanders who want Auckland times 2, go to Sydney. Which, I
Pretty
know a lot
much,
of you
yeah.
guys
That's
still
pretty
listening are.
similar, to be honest.
Great marketing. That was
Great
really tailored.
Yeah, target audience right here. Yeah, I know who you are. No, just kidding.
And
No,
would you say Melbourne is closer to Wellington then, Dylan?
Yeah, I think given I've lived in Wellington for about 2 years now, it's got that same kind of vibe. It's slightly different in terms of scale, probably 10 times more people, if not 15 times, a lot more people in Melbourne. But like the, cafe arts culture in Wellington is pretty, like up there. And there's things, all sorts of things in the CBD. And Melbourne, I think, I'd say from my one time I was a tourist, which I really enjoyed. Thanks so much for hosting me for a bit, Irene. It was a good time. Showing you around, but like the CBD is probably one of the best I've probably personally experienced as like a tourist. I don't know, like if you've lived in there, but just how easy it is to get around and the amount of things,
Yeah,
What do
it's
you
like the
guys think?
grid structure makes it so
Yeah,
easy to navigate. It's
It is.
literally,
efficient.
It's so good, and it just makes sense, you know? You have like the main street, you have Collins Street. What's the road after that? Little Collins Street. Just makes sense.
Is it Big Collins Street or?
That's just Collins Street.
Yeah, very logical names. We love
Yeah,
that.
it makes a lot of sense. And like you said, it's really easy to navigate. And don't forget the free trams. Everyone always says it, but
Yes.
it's amazing.
Very
Gets you
true.
around.
Free tram zone.
Really awesome. Love taking trams. That's not a tourist activity in itself, I'd say, but I mean, for some people, if it's not common where you are, then definitely. What about I guess things in the wider region? Do you guys get out much in like wider Victoria, New South Wales? It's a big space, I've heard. Like
Yeah. Well, I go out quite a bit. I don't have a car, but like I go out with my partner. And we like to go out for hikes quite a lot. So close by to Sydney, there's this region called Blue Mountains, which has amazing hikes. It's really close by, really easily accessible. But up and down from Sydney as well, you have amazing coastlines, beaches, also mountainous hikes, and it's just a great time. I think for nature, New South Wales definitely has a lot at an easily accessible distance.
Yeah. I think in Victoria, you kind of need a car to see sort of the areas, like more regional areas, but sort of a local hiking spot. I don't think you'd even call it a hike. It's more like a walk, but 1,000 steps is really popular on the east side. If you feel like you've haven't done much exercise in a while, I think that's a good one to shock you out of that. But yeah, we also have like the Grampians, the Great Ocean Road, um, Wilson's Prom, Phillip Island, like a lot of like really popular regional areas that you can get to, but you usually need a car to get there. But it's usually quite scenic, mountains, beaches. Yeah, you can get quite a range of sort of sceneries here, which is nice as well. So yeah, plenty to see and do. And I don't know if you guys have like been seeing a lot of ads lately, like travel, like tourism
Yeah,
ads, but
so
like
many
there's
this
always
year,
like there's always
particularly
like
this
regional
year.
Victoria ads, like going
Yeah.
around. It's like go visit your local regional area.
And it's some town that you've never heard of, and they're
Yeah.
like, "We'll welcome you."
Exactly. But actually, a couple of weeks ago, I did like a long weekend down in Mornington Peninsula in Victoria. And yeah, like a lot of the places that we saw were very much like, I wouldn't call it rural because I think Mornington's relatively populated for like a holiday spot. But yeah, there was this like tiny little cafe in the middle of nowhere. And it was very much like a replica of like a Melbourne cafe, and they had like square payment and everything, but it was like literally in the middle of nowhere. So it was like a bit of a contrast. But I think it just goes to show that like that cafe culture really like spreads everywhere, like not just in the CBD, but like also regional Victoria as well. But yeah.
Yeah. Do you ever get sick of cafes in Melbourne? That's one thing I'm like really curious
Ooh.
about because I really like it as well, but I think I really like it as a tourist. I don't know how
Yeah.
much I would have like if it was an everyday thing. Does it make it feel
Yeah.
less special though? Like I'm
Mm.
actually just genuinely curious.
I actually haven't had like I feel like I haven't had brunch in a really long time. And I feel like it's one of those things where it's like if I'm feeling in a particular way one particular day, I'll just be like, yeah, let's go for brunch. And like it's like a whole thing. Um, so I think because I don't go every single weekend, like I know some people go every single weekend, like I don't personally get sick of it. I kind of like that cafe vibe, but I don't go super often. So for me, it's not something that, yeah, I'm necessarily sick of yet.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
But also, I don't drink coffee. So the good coffee here is wasted on me, unfortunately. So I tend to just go for like some eggs my way, add some mushrooms on the side, maybe a potato roasty. Just really basic.
I heard that's
Really
amazing.
basic brunch. But honestly,
Love it.
I'm
Love
it.
easily
Classics.
satisfied. Like if the eggs are poached well, like I'm happy. That's it. If they're overdone, that's when it's a fail. So I've got a pretty low threshold when it comes to
Yeah, hot tips from 20 plus years of experience
living in Melbourne.
of Melbourne's cafes and brunches. You heard it here first.
But now Adam, now I need your view on cafes.
I feel like I really like Melbourne cafes as well. It's always a treat. There's definitely more. I would say there's more amazing cafes in Melbourne than there are in Sydney. Like top quality, best of the best, like those ones. You find more in number in Melbourne than there are in Sydney. It's more easier to find, and I feel cafes. Maybe even food as a whole, it's very hard to find a bad food place in Melbourne. Or from my experience, anyway. I'm sure it exists, but like I feel there's just so many more good places to eat, for whether for cafes or for just general food. But one thing I do feel in Melbourne is everything is very aesthetic. Like the Melbourne cafe culture is very aesthetic focused and sometimes not as much flavor or taste focused.
Oh,
Whoa.
Hot take.
Hot take.
Spicy.
But in saying
Spicy
so,
Unlike
that-
the food.
and saying so, that's just because there's so many like good cafes. I think a lot of them try to differentiate themselves with like how it looks.
Yeah.
There's only like so much you can do, right? So I definitely get that as well.
Yeah, not gonna lie, looking at Irene's Instagram stories, I can definitely see that Melbourne aesthetic coming through it. All the food places, it's like honestly, the aesthetics are on point. Like all the presentability is of places,
Top notch.
interiors of like cafes, plus their food is very at a high standard. I
Yeah.
I think what I remember, in Melbourne, going to lots of the famous cafes on say a Saturday or Sunday for brunch. It was just I think people were just always there. There was always lots of people waiting and like jostling to get a spot. It kind of proves how good they're also like hard to plan sometimes if you don't book or plan ahead
Yeah.
too much, right?
Sometimes it's all hype, like something is on Instagram and everyone wants to try it, or it's like a new spot and then the food's just like trash. It looks good, but it's trash.
We're
But
speaking of food so much right now, and I'm starting to get hungry, even though I've just eaten. um, yeah, actually, like, might as well
Do,
just talk about it now. Do you
yeah,
guys have any top recommendations or anything?
what
Come on, what's up?
what's
Oh,
your top cafes, sorry, or top food recommendations
oh,
as a whole?
oh my gosh, I feel like I need to check my Zomato. But from the top of my head, I think something that's aesthetic and yum, like it's always good, is
Mm,
Kalia. Do you have that in Sydney?
Kalia. Yes,
Yeah.
oh no, we don't, but it is
Okay.
quite good. It
Yes.
is really good.
I feel like they got on the scene because they were super aesthetic, but then the food
Mm,
backed it up. So I would recommend there for like some good, I don't know how I'd call it. It's sort of like Asian fusion maybe.
yeah, is this the
Sort
one
of.
in Emporium?
Yes, it's Emporium and also Chadston if you live in the
Okay.
southeast.
Yeah.
Um what else? A brunch
local
spot.
specials,
Oh yeah, I
local
guess I'll
spots.
have to talk about Springvale. I have to talk about the food there.
Oh,
I mean, if you want Vietnamese food in Victoria, or in Melbourne, Greater Melbourne, there's Springvale and I think Footscray are like the two sort of hubs. But yeah, I live in Springvale, so obviously I've grown up in that area and I know the food pretty well there. So like I do have a go-to like far spot. Um, I don't know the name of it. That's how like small it is. It's
That's how
literally like
good
a
it
hole
is.
in the wall.
You're
I
not meant to
don't
it's a
know
know
the
the
local
name.
name.
spot.
But like hit me up if you need the name. I'll look it up. Look it up for
They
you. But
but they're all so good, aren't they? I feel like most
yeah.
first spots
We'll leave
you can't
we'll
really
leave a
go wrong.
section in the podcast if you're listening on Spotify for people to chuck their food recommendations. How about that?
Yes.
All right,
Sounds
so
Yes. Definitely.
also if you're in Springvale, shout out to Bum Bum Bakery, my favorite spot
Oh, the banh mi. Yes.
for the banh
It's
mi.
getting expensive now. Like
Is it?
a banh mi now
yeah.
costs like $7.50. Which,
Wow.
okay, to give some context, I would say maybe 10 years ago. Okay, maybe 10 years is a long time, but just bear with me. 10 years ago, a banh mi was like $4. So it's like
Wow.
doubled almost in 10 years. And mind you, it's a sandwich. It's a really yummy sandwich, but it's just a sandwich. So like it's insane to me. It's like almost reaching levels of like more like less authentic Vietnamese, more like chain Vietnamese stores that tend
Okay.
to like have hiked up prices. So it's starting to like almost be neck and neck in terms of that. But yeah, sorry, side note about banh
Interesting.
mi's. But
I think it was like
Interesting.
I think it was only $5 or $6 when I was there
yeah,
about less than 2 years ago.
inflation, guys.
Inflation is crazy.
Yeah. What about
Yeah.
Sydney food spots?
Sydney food spots. I think there's quite a few. I feel you're probably less safe than Melbourne if you were to like walk around blindly and just walk into a restaurant. But I think Sydney is more if you know, you know, and
Hmm.
you got to know where you're going.
Right.
But there's quite a few good spots. One place that I normally take a lot of people to is this place called Kowloon Cafe, which is like a Hong Kong cafe, which is really really good. Highly recommend. But in terms of more like Western or brunch spots, um, not even brunch spots, like Western spots. I really like this Italian restaurant nearby called Kindred.
Mm.
Oh, sorry, not is it Kindred? Yes, yes, it is called Kindred. Yeah, I had to check my Google Maps here. Yeah, Kindred. So it's like a really small rustic place that's renovated out from just renovated out from like a townhouse. So it's a real homely feel. Like you feel like you're sitting down at your nonna's house, that your non-existent Italian nonna, but it was it's great. It's always a great time.
Most people,
Um, yeah, and I guess one of my favorite dining experiences in Sydney so far has to be a Peruvian Japanese fusion.
yeah.
Mm.
Oh,
Let me
wow.
just find the
Throwback.
name. Peruvian Japanese fusion
Love,
is
yeah.
Nikkei Cafe
Okay.
and Bar, a bar and restaurant. It is so good. It's a bit more on the pricier side, but it's one of my favorite places to go to in Sydney.
Wait, I've got a couple more food recs before we move on.
Yes.
Um,
Hit us up. We'll take it
no,
away.
I have to tell. The people have to know. I think for just
They're asking for it. Hungry
for
for
just
it.
really like basic like dumplings, Shanghainese noodles, Ping's dumplings or Ping's
Mm,
Dumpling Kitchen. It's in Clayton, also in the southeast, and also in the same suburb. There's a really good Korean spot. I think it's called Hidori Korean. But yeah, I've actually only been to Hidori once. I've been to Ping's many, many times, but also Hodori, Korean garden. And when we went, I was really, really impressed. We've only been once, but we want to go again really soon. So
oh, sounds good.
just want to drop those two in there.
Yeah. No. For the listeners of Chilling with Dylan, you might catch Irene at Hidori pretty soon whenever she's there. So just keep an
I
eye
just realized though, all my recommendations are Asian food.
out. Not
It's
gonna
not
lie.
very
You
diverse.
need to branch out, Irene.
Okay, wait. Just to balance it out, let me just do one brunch spot.
Mhm.
There's a spot in Mount Waverley that's pretty good, and it is called Son of Tucci. Son of Tucci in Mount Waverley has really good brunch, and
Mm,
also Glenny Kebabs if you want kebabs as well.
there we go, the locals recommendation.
Yeah, they're very local spots.
Have you
Oops.
been to Hardware Society, Irene?
No, I haven't. Oh, maybe I have, but I feel like those like fancy brunch places, I tend to only go if someone is coming to visit and I'm gonna take them
Ah,
there,
it's a
or it's
tourist
like
trap.
I feel like, well, I don't know. I don't know if many locals would go into the city just to eat brunch on any particular day. You know what I
Fair,
mean? Like I feel like
fair.
it's that vibe. But I might have been before, might not have been, but if have been, it wasn't super memorable, obviously.
Oh, okay. There you
I don't
go.
know.
You heard it here first, guys.
Alright, I've got some actually to add just a little bit to round this out.
Okay.
Noting what you mentioned. um, I remember being in Melbourne and there's like a suburb a little bit north of the CBD that's got a lot of really great Italian restaurants and places. I think it's Carlton, is that there's like a lot of
Yes.
good quality Italian places there. So if you want
Yes.
some,
Lygon Street for Italian food for sure.
yeah, good pasta, jump there. And yeah, it's I think what's kind of cool. I remember being there and like there's a whole bunches of people who are just speaking Italian, and it's like it feels as authentic as you can to the cuisine and the type of place in a place like place like Melbourne, where or Sydney, where like you have all these different little areas and suburbs, like different cultures that flourish, and the
Hmm.
Vietnamese suburbs and stuff. They all have their character. So go exploring, and you'll find so many things and places. I think
Yeah.
Sure.
that will
On,
surprise you. Yeah.
on that topic, I reckon probably one of the biggest differences that I feel there is between Sydney and Melbourne is Sydney feels a lot more like as if it's isolated pockets of different cultural and ethnic backgrounds,
Hmm.
whereas Melbourne feels, even though you do find some of that, it's a lot more of like a melting pot of all different cultures, and people tend to move around between suburbs quite a lot. Whereas I feel Sydney, a lot of people tend to stick with people that are similar to them in that way.
Mm.
It's not as homogenous. Which
Are you not talking about Auckland?
same thing, same thing, same thing. It's
Auckland.
maybe it's the same geography. It's got the same
I just sorry
distribution.
for the non-New Zealanders listening to this. This is just we're just like taking that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think this is not about outside of Australia, but we're just roasting our
Mhm.
home city a bit. But yeah, Anyways, I think you're right though, Adam. Yeah, like because Sydney is like I think like you got all these western suburbs that sprawl on and on and on. I think it's quite easy for people like different groups and like sort of bubbles and things to occur. Yeah, but that's it's it's good for a lot of people. So
Yeah, yeah. But it is what it is. But I feel Melbourne. Maybe another big difference is Melbourne's just a really cool city. I don't know. I feel like you've got to have a certain amount of street cred to live in Melbourne.
Whose
Oh
side are you
wow!
on, Adam?
I know. I'm confused now.
No, no, but I feel like in saying so. I feel like it's almost a bit too cool for me. You know,
No.
it's a really cool
No
city.
way.
It's got a really cool vibe. Everyone dresses really nicely. I feel Melbourne fashion is definitely a bit better than Sydney. But yeah, it's a very cool city. Whereas I think Sydney is a bit more like no frills, like just get in, get your job done, and go home kind of thing. So it depends on what sort of vibe you like, where you like to go for. Melbourne has a bit more flair.
That extra, a little bit extra, that kind of vibe.
Yeah, Sydney's a bit more straight to the point from what
Okay,
I've
right.
observed. Yeah.
I will say though, I do feel like people in Sydney, at least like corporate Sydney, they dress a lot better or more formal than
Oh
Melbourne.
yeah, actually that's
That
kind
I
of
will say
true.
though. Like
That is true.
something
I
I've
feel like
noticed.
on the professional note, like that corporate arena or like whatever the professional I guess vibe I seem to get from Melbourne is that it's a bit more laid back. Is that sort of true? Although I know there's like all sorts of
Yeah.
different places, but yeah.
I think for me, like I haven't worked in Sydney for a prolonged period of time, so I don't think I can comment so much on the culture, but I do like hear a lot about differences, like people who are maybe from Sydney who've come to Melbourne to work or vice versa. Like I think I have heard that the culture in Sydney, at least the work culture, is a little bit more like, yeah, maybe a little bit more intense maybe than Melbourne, perhaps. Yeah, I can only really comment on like the way people dress and stuff, obviously, which is like maybe not a super good reflection of everything else. But I think in terms of that work culture, I think it might be a little bit more sort of a grind in Sydney. Maybe. I don't know. Adam, what do you think?
I haven't really worked in too many Sydney companies. A lot of the places I've worked at are based out of Melbourne, so I can't really say much for myself.
It's a
But
biased opinion here then.
a biased opinion, but I do feel like that's true from what I've observed as well. I think Melbourne tends, from what I've seen, tends to value work-life balance a little bit more, whereas Sydney gives off more of like the grinding mindset. You know, you work hard, you go really, you work hard, play hard kind of mindset a lot more. Yeah, I don't know. When I think of Sydney, it's like real professional, real formal attire, or like your sportswear that you'd wear to the beach.
It's like two
or something.
spectrums.
Two spectrums. Yeah, exactly. Whereas I feel Melbourne has more of that middle ground.
All right. So,
Yeah.
I guess I don't know. Yeah, I have never worked in Australia or like Sydney or Melbourne or gone more than a week or two, in these places. But from what I'm getting, it sounds like, just to simplify things, if you were some like budding tech entrepreneur, you probably suit the lifestyle in Melbourne. You'd whatever it is, unless you like surfing or something. But if you're like some sort of like corporate finance bro, maybe Sydney's more your vibe. Yeah.
Although I feel like Sydney have more of Australia's tech. So maybe
Oh,
I
does
don't
it? Yeah,
know.
okay.
I don't know
Okay.
anymore.
It's hard to
Bigger tech, I think, is more in
big
Sydney.
Bigger tech in
Big
Sydney.
tech
the
is in Sydney.
Googles and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
your
the likes of that.
Googles, your Amazons, your Canva, your like a lot of the bigger tech
Oh,
companies.
is Canva big tech now?
I feel like they're on the way. They're on the way
Canva's
there.
pretty
They're
big.
big now. They're big now, aren't they? And Atlassian, isn't it? Like they're
Yes,
Atlassian is
Atlas.
another Australian homegrown tech former
giant.
startup.
Yeah.
They were all former startups once, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, I guess the thing is, I think from what I know, there's a lot of stuff going on in the economy, work-wise, career-wise in both cities. But like, is there any points of difference? Like I guess that I guess in either place that you guys have noticed?
Like
Was there?
livability. Is that what
Yeah,
we're talking
yeah,
about now?
Yeah.
yeah. Just a balance between living and working. More like, yeah, for those who want to settle there permanently, or
Okay, I'll go first only because I feel like Adam will have more insight. He's lived in both Melbourne and Sydney. So, um, I don't know. I guess I think. Oh, it's so hard for me to say because I feel like because I haven't lived in Sydney again for a prolonged amount
yeah.
of time. I've only been there for like work trips.
It's all right. We just
Mm.
yeah.
I think um, Melbourne, like I know obviously Melbourne's sort of known as being like the world's most livable city, or at least it was at one point in time.
Mhm.
Um, and I think it's sort of a mix of a lot of things. Like I think it's the culture, the vibe. I think just how easy it is to get around as well. Um, there's just so many amenities and things anywhere that you are. Like I think Greater Melbourne is relatively well serviced, is what I would say in terms of like amenities and sort of like the basic things you need to like live a good life. Um, obviously, some areas are better than others, but I think that's a separate story. Um, but yeah, I think in general, like I don't know if like cost of living is higher in Sydney. I know property prices in Sydney are crazy. They are in Melbourne as well, but I think Sydney's worse in that regard. So I think
Mm.
probably cost of
Mm,
living is worse in Sydney. Um, but yeah, I don't know if I could really tell. I think other than just like the overall like culture and everything we'd sort of already discussed, I'm not sure what other sort of stark differences there are.
Yeah, I feel from my observations, cost of living for most things are quite similar. Maybe
Mhm.
food is a little bit more expensive in Sydney,
Mm.
but it's more or less pretty comparable. But the biggest difference is the cost of like housing, which
Mm.
is
oh
very, very
right.
expensive
How
in Sydney.
how much would the difference be? Like
Um,
percentage, or I guess
just like
general
from my
guidelines.
observation, maybe like an apartment in the city in Sydney can be like like a studio apartment 500, 600 even
Oh
per
yeah,
week
yeah,
for an
Mm.
apartment, whereas I feel Melbourne is probably more 300, 400, 500-ish, so a little bit
Mm.
cheaper. Or like a shared house in Melbourne might be only $200 or something per week, whereas I
Mm.
feel in Sydney it's quite often 300 to 400 per week,
Mm.
even
yeah.
for a shared house. So
That's quite a lot.
it
So
is quite a bit more.
yeah, guys, remember we're recording this in May 2022. In another year, it will be double that.
Yeah.
Just,
Oh my god.
Yeah,
just so we don't sound stupid, guys.
Yeah. This
No,
is
no.
timely information.
exactly. This is what the prices are right now. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, definitely Sydney's known to be a very, very unaffordable location. Comparatively, Melbourne's a bit more affordable, but we're really talking about unaffordable versus really unaffordable. So it's like not it's
Yeah,
not saying much here.
Yeah.
Yeah, but other than that, I feel like there's a lot of stuff that we already talked about. I feel Sydney covers all of your needs as well. There's nothing that I really find lacking in Sydney. I think one thing Sydney that does have over Melbourne are the trains.
Mm.
oh
Although
yeah.
they aren't the most reliable, I feel they're more reliable than Melbourne trains.
Is this the trains? Are these the ones out to like the regions, like really far, and as well as within the city, the
Yeah, so
metro
both.
lines?
I haven't actually taken the train outside of Sydney, but like
Yeah.
within Sydney, it's very easy to get to. One
Mm.
Mm.
thing I really like is that you can take the train from the airport straight into the city. That's
Yes,
Oh,
fantastic.
that's awesome.
It's
Yeah.
always a pain in the ass having to go from
oh my
Tullamarine into
god.
city,
We're getting
or
there. We're getting there.
or God forbid Avalon into.
Oh,
Yeah. Where even
I
is Avalon? No one knows.
not gonna lie, I've done that. I had to go through that, and I will not speak too much about it.
I've
But
done it. Would not recommend.
Yeah. No, Sydney
yeah,
also has like double decker trains. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
We
true.
have like
Yeah,
regular basic trains. Although we have like I think we're starting to like implement some more upgraded trains with like the proper displays on the screens and stuff, which is
Mm.
nice. And I think the train network is getting better. Like I think they're currently going through like removing all the what is it like the crossing like what do you call those like the crossings that sort of like stop cars from going across the train tracks. I'm trying to explain,
Oh.
but yeah,
the
they're trying
barriers.
to
Yeah, whatever.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I can't think of the actual name, but yeah, I think it's getting better. And in terms of like a train to the airport, that's very much needed, and I think it's in the works.
Mm.
Um, but
Alright.
something else I was going to mention was, and this is something I only found out recently, but apparently Sydney has like a digital, like you can house your driver's license digitally.
Yeah, that's right. Everything is sort of cardless.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
can get around. Oh,
Wow.
sorry, cash. Like you don't need a physical copy. Everything's on your phone pretty much at this point.
Yeah.
Melbourne
Wow.
is like nowhere near that. Like we're still using like physical ID, like physical Mikey cards. Like for Android, you can pay using Google Pay now. Like Mikey's on Google Pay, but for like Apple users, that hasn't been implemented yet. Like I think we're still a little bit behind in like the digital infrastructure
Yeah.
as well
Mm.
Hey,
compared to
just
Sydney.
gonna throw it out there, but spare a little thought for old Wellington here. We still have trains that require paper tickets and there's no cards.
Oh my
That's
gosh,
actually
paper
Wow.
tickets.
such last last century
Wait,
thing.
paper
Which was,
tickets?
yeah, honestly, so like this, you guys should come to Wellington and go to the Wellington train station. It literally reminds you of Hogwarts. There's like a platform 9 3/4 thing, but like there's a little booth where like people line up to buy a ticket, and then once you get in the train, they clip it, and someone comes by. That's like,
You
yeah,
can't even.
I know.
There's not
Yeah,
even a kiosk. You can't even just like press a few buttons and print something.
don't think so. Not at most. Yeah,
Wow. Okay.
no. Um,
But
and
where can you even go with a train in Wellington? I didn't. First of all, I didn't know that there was a
yeah.
train in Wellington.
Yeah. No, you can go into the region and stuff. There's places and
Okay.
towns, but yeah. I guess it sort of shows that infrastructure. Like, there's like, you know. I know that Irene's complaining a little bit, or like maybe not. You're just comparing to Sydney, but like,
Comparing, yeah.
but when I was in Melbourne, I was like, whoa, this is so much
High
easier than
tech.
anywhere I've like lived. You know, like the one thing I remember, the trams are pretty popular, the free trams, but it does get like things do get crowded,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
especially the free things, and um, is that the case for both places in rush hours, like peak times? It would be places to avoid, or I know other parts of the world, say London, people hate being in the tube and
Yeah.
the underground because people literally like squished up. You're
I'm
kissing someone's butt almost, not like that, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's quite as bad as that, but I've definitely seen people like have to squeeze into a train
Yeah.
during peak rush hour, or like you can't even catch a train that arrives just because
Okay.
it's too packed. So,
Yeah. Like I'm thinking of like pre-COVID times, like because I went to high school in the city for like part of my high school career, and we used to commute into the city or into the city pretty much every day. And there were days where literally it was like sardines. Like it was horrible. And I think about it now and I'm like, there's no way we can go back to that with, like post-pandemic. Like there's no way like that can even be
Yeah.
allowed because it would literally be people squashed up against each other. Like it was insane.
Yeah, the worst. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you
Yeah,
ever
yeah.
see someone's like cheek squished up against
Cheek against
like
cheek against
the
cheek.
window, that's like from the outside, you're like, oh fam, that ain't good.
It's actually better
And,
to be near the doors because then every time they'd open, you get some fresh air
Yeah.
versus like being
but you
part
know,
of the
you only get squished out and have to like run back, or like you move to you go outside to let someone leave, and then it
Yeah,
closes on you.
exactly.
No, but hey,
Exactly.
like honestly, yeah, there's when I think just transport in general, like when there's good systems and public transport around, like becomes popular, that like the benefits like slowly starts decreasing a little bit due to scale, and it's the same for motorways and things like that, where like at first they speed things up, and but then yeah, like it's just hard to balance it all eventually. Yeah, people crowd to wherever is good. So yeah, that's hopefully post COVID, yeah, we'll be a bit more civilized, I hope. Yeah. Well, I guess speaking of that, like, have you guys, to round off, had any thoughts on any tips, or yeah, just hot tips that people who have no idea whether they're visiting or have moved, living to, place like Sydney or Melbourne for the first time, might want to know, in case, yeah, things the locals know, or you know,
Bondi Beach isn't always it's cracked up to be, especially not during like a weekend or a really hot day. But there are great beaches in Sydney, though. I'm just saying, just don't go to the touristy spots, and you'll have a great time.
Okay, yeah. If you fly all the way across the world to go to Bondi, don't expect it to be empty, like the pictures sort of
Yeah,
thing.
you just see a lot of people. It's more,
Yeah.
it's just a lot more people than it should be at
Okay.
a beach. Coming from New Zealand, I think it's
Oh
just,
yeah.
it ain't right. Okay. Yeah.
Let's see, hot tips. I think for Victoria, if you want a good beach, you need to go outside of Melbourne. Like, I think
Oh
that's a must. Like, there's St Kilda Beach in the city, but I don't think it's that great compared to the beaches sort of, yeah, further out. Um, what else? I would call out NGV as a good place to visit because oftentimes their exhibits are free. Like, you can
yeah.
sort of pay to see certain ones, but there have been some really great ones that are also just free of charge if you want to go in and have a look. What else? I think Melbourne Airport is the only airport that has like an Uber,
Oh,
um, what do you call it? It's essentially you go up to like the Uber
a
booth,
rank.
a
Yeah.
rank, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And you essentially like put in your details, you get a number,
Yeah,
Oh,
and
that's
then
cool.
any
that's
Uber can
different.
just drive in and you give them the number and then they take you where you need to go versus you
Right.
having to like stand on the corner and drop your pin and call an
That's
Uber to that
Yeah.
specific spot. So I don't know if they're trialing it in Melbourne and they're gonna like,
yeah.
you know, um, roll it out elsewhere. But that's pretty cool if you do want a
Okay.
really
Right. It's good.
quick Uber from the airport.
It's a good hot tip. I and maybe the other hot tip is that there's only one real airport in Melbourne. We won't talk about
Don't go to the wrong one.
Avalon
avoid
doesn't count.
Avalon at all costs.
Like, unless
That
you've
is a
got the
good
whole
tip.
day to chill and it's not like a really busy day, then maybe you might consider it. You save around maybe, I don't know what, $30 on your
Right.
flights sometimes. But
Mhm.
it's yeah, it takes up a lot more time to get to and from.
Really shitting on Avalon today. I've never been there, so I feel bad.
I can't even say for
I don't. Yeah. It probably isn't that bad, but you know, like we've talked up so many restaurants and stuff. There had to be something we have to pick on, and
That's true.
we apologize officially on behalf of Chill and Dylan Productions to the CEO of Avalon and those associated.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if there's any more like real touristy tips I'd give for Sydney. I feel like you can probably do most of the touristy things in 1 to 2 days. But if you have the chance, try to go outside of Sydney to the suburbs as well. Probably similar tip as for Melbourne. I think there's a lot more happening in the suburbs, and it's definitely a lot more fun in that way.
Yes. I should
Cool,
have
well,
also pack for 4 seasons in a day in Melbourne. I mean it's not
yeah,
guaranteed to happen, but
yeah,
there have definitely been times where it's just started raining randomly. So bring an umbrella,
yeah.
bring something
Hmm.
waterproof.
Oh,
That's what I would say as well.
love that chaotic weather. Amazing. Yeah, I'm used to that, unfortunately. Yeah,
You'll be very prepared.
yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well,
um,
final thoughts. What are your final thoughts on where you would live? Well, like what's a better
Oh yeah,
city?
Dylan,
As
now you
going back
have
to
to
the main.
choose.
am I the judge now? Oh,
Yeah, you're the judge.
I don't know. That's a hard decision to make. Like, Adam, you know what like the conversations we've had over the years. We've been talking about this topic
Yes.
for
Yeah.
like 5 years or
I
something
know
since we
Dylan's
know
old
each
end.
other.
I know
I've
Dylan's
I've
old end.
flipped. I've actually flipped. I used to be on the Melbourne side. Well, I still really like Melbourne, but I'm living in
Yeah,
Sydney right
I
now.
know, I
So
know. This is
yeah.
the thing. I remember originally Adam was straight up like on the Melbourne bus. Melbourne's gonna suit me. I'm gonna like, you know, like, live there and work there, and then all of a sudden becomes a Sydney guy. You know, like working. You know, must be some great people there for whoever lives there. And for me, I remember a couple of years ago, I think I visited Sydney and then Melbourne shortly after. It was in 2019, and so like I had to answer to you guys because you forced me to. Um, but just from this podcast, I'd say like just on the balance, just tip what like slightly over for visiting. I think I would enjoy Sydney more. For living, I think Melbourne would be some place that I would find more livable, just as it has been voted. That's my conclusion. So not quite,
Not
clear
quite
cut
the same as
winner,
yours before.
but they're both great. Yeah,
Yeah. I think
We love it.
it depends. It depends on
it
you.
depends.
They're both great cities, though. They're
Yeah.
both fantastic cities.
Yes, I agree. 100%.
Visit them if you can, if you haven't. And if you live there, yeah, try not to move, I guess, if you like it.
The grass is not greener on the other side. Stay where you are. If you're in Melbourne or Sydney.
No. Okay, well, it was so fun. Thanks so much for sharing your thoughts and experiences. It's good to have the CWD squad together just to decide on this very contentious topic. So thanks, Adam, and thanks, Irene.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us, Dylan.
All right, thanks, and thanks to the fans for listening. We'll have more amazing, contentious debates and discussions about places probably soon.
Leave us your food recommendations down below.
Yes, yeah, chuck
Yes,
it below. We're like pointing down in this call that we have. That's not going to be. There's nothing here. Just look on Spotify. All right, you've listened to another episode of Chillin' with
Dylan.